Okay. Good afternoon, guys. We are back here in class. There's nobody in person, so I guess we'll continue this online. We're gonna see if anybody joins later. All right. God bless you, Adamaris, Isaías, Emily, Sister Norma. If you guys are watching this later, God bless you all. Missed you all today. I was here a little late, but you're later. We're gonna continue on page 11. We left off on page 10 previously. Page 11, Events of the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages begins in 476 AD with the fall of Rome by the invasions of the barbarians. In the Middle Ages, some events of social, economic, and political importance took place. The period of the Middle Ages has traditionally been delimited with the emphasis on the political events. In these terms, it would have begun with this disintegration of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century and during the barbarian invasions, and ended with the end of the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, when Constantinople fell in the 15th century, or with the discovery of America in 1492. That is when Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. I'm sure you all have seen I've heard the song. The Americas, New World in 1492. Okay. Make a note of that, please. Highlight 1492 when America was discovered. The next chapter, periodization. The Middle Ages is usually divided into minor periods. One of the most popular types of the classification is the one that divides it into two periods, High Middle Age and Lower Middle Age. Together, these were known as the Dark Ages, okay? The Dark Ages. But separate them into two, High Middle Age and Lower Middle Age. So the first one, High Middle Age, ranging from the 5th to the 10th centuries. The second one extends from the 11th to the 15th centuries. So about 5 centuries each, more or less, okay? The fall of the Western Roman Empire, also called the fall of the Roman Empire of the fall of Rome, was the period of decline for the Western Roman Empire in which it lost the authority to exercise its rules, and its vast territory was divided into numerous political entities. The main characteristics of the fall was the loss of the Roman state ability to dominate both its armed forces and its civil administration. This article begins with an explanation of the forces that has allowed the Roman Empire to exercise effective control. Modern historians mention factors that include the efficiency of the size of the army, the health and size of the Roman population, the power of the economy, and the efficiency of civil administrations, etc. factors, etc. The increased pressure of the barbarians outside of Roman culture contributes greatly to the collapse. Below it is a chronological account of the most important events of the loss of power, including attempts to reverse the decline. The reasons of the collapse that were debated at the time, which are the main topics of the ancient world historiography and providing modern discourse on the failure of the state, that are the possible causes of the loss of power and are mentioned in the chronological order in which they were reported. The first one in the year of 476. Remember, we went over this, the Middle Ages. Odoacer deposed the Emperor Romulus, a Western Roman emperor who exercised insignificant military, political, and financial power. He had no effective control over the scattered Western domains that would still be classified as Romans. The barbarian invaders established their own authority in the most of the Western Empire area, and their sovereignty lasted centuries. And in addition, their cultural influences persist to this day, while the Western Empire never had the strength to rise again. Now, fun fact, you can find out a little bit about the Roman Empire in the book of Daniel when the dream is interpreted by Daniel, the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, the statue and the different types of different bronzes and gold that the statue was made. In case you guys are curious, like where in the Bible this is mentioned before. The history, we're in page 12. Islamic power developed. The history of Islam includes the history of the Islamic faith as a religion and social institution. Like most religions in the world, and military history of the areas inside and outside what are considered their main geographical areas of reach. As with Christianity, the concept of the Islamic world can be more or less useful when seeing different periods of history. An important current Islamic culture encourages identification with the community. The history of Islam as a religion is closely related to political, economical, and military. The next paragraph says, Islam emerged in Arabia in the 7th century of the Christian era, with the appearance of the Prophet Muhammad. A century after his death, Islam extended from the Atlantic Ocean in the west to Central Asia in the east. This empire did not stay together for long. The new system of the government soon resulted in a civil war known to Islamic historians as the Fitna. Fitna means revolt. This was the revolt, and later affected by a second revolt, a second Fitna. After this, rival dynasties would claim the caliphate or leadership of the Muslim world, and many Islamic states and empires offered only symbolic obedience to the caliph, unable to unify the Islamic world. So, with the Quran or the Prophet Muhammad, who created the Quran in the future, he appeared 600 years after Jesus, and in the Quran, you guys can note this down for your own defense and your own faith that the Quran does state that Jesus is not the Messiah. It says that Jesus is a prophet, that Jesus is not God, that he is only a prophet, and that we should follow the rules of Muhammad. That is why the Islamic people follow Muhammad and they follow the Quran. They believe with certainty that Jesus was only a prophet, that Jesus' miracles were not Jesus, that it was simply a prayer, and that a lot of people can do this. But of course, God and Jesus did say that we would have that power to heal after his death once he paid for our sins and stuff. So it's just twisted in the sense of a different type of religion, different doctrine. It's twisted, but it makes sense in their version for them, and it doesn't make sense to us for the same thing, same background knowledge that we know about Jesus, that he is the Messiah, that he is the Lord and Savior, that through him we are saved, that through his sacrifice, God gave his only one child so that all who believe may be saved. John 3:16, if you guys need a refresher right on this little piece of history. Okay, I went off topic. I'm going to bring it back to the next paragraph. Despite this fragmentation of Islam as a political community, the empires of the Abbas Caliphate, the Mughal, and the Ottoman Seljuks were among the largest and most powerful in the world. The Arabs made many Islamic centers of culture and science from which notable Islamic scientists, astronomers, mathematicians, doctors, and philosophers emerged during the golden age of Islam. Technology flourished. There was a lot of investment in economic infrastructure, such as irrigation systems and canals. The emphasis on the importance of reading the Quran produced a high level of literacy in the general population. They basically made it a requirement to know the Quran since you are born. And a lot of them don't practice religion, but they practice rituals. What does that mean? It means that even today there are Arabics in our country who practice fasting for 40 days during the time of fall, I believe it is. And they don't pray, they don't do none of that. It's just culturally a tradition, it's a ritual in their own house. So they're not praying, they're not practicing religion, but they're practicing the rituals of the Islamic religion because it is important for them that their family starts introducing it to their kids as soon as they're born and makes them practice it. Whether they believe it or not, it just becomes a tradition. It becomes cultural. They will do it whether they're praying or not because their parents taught them to do it. It becomes a lifestyle instead of religious choice. It becomes a lifestyle. Okay, that was just another fact I wanted to mention. The next paragraph. Later in the 18th and 19th centuries, the Islamic regions fell under the influence of the powerful European empires. After World War I and the occupation of Constantinople, the remnants of the Ottoman Empire were divided into the partition of the Ottoman Empire and European protectors. It says protectores, but it should be protectors. Okay. Next paragraph. After many centuries, there is no great and widely accepted claim for the caliphate, which had been claimed at least by the Ottomans. This Ottoman Empire was the most recent one. It has been replaced. We don't know it as the Ottoman. We know it now as the Turkish Republic. So it still exists. It's in Turkey. It's in in Europe, but it's been replaced by Turkish Republic, right? The Ottoman Empire. A lot of the same things still going on since the Ottoman Empire. A lot of religious movements still happening over there right now. It might be from the war that's going on with Gaza and Israel, but there's now persecution of Christians currently today. It's one of the reasons why our trips to go to Europe has been delayed. I don't know if anybody knows about that, but we've canceled the trips since last November when the war broke out over a year ago, and then we were going to do it again this year and to Turkey instead of Israel, instead of Gaza. We were going to go to Turkey. And again, it's been postponed because of Christians being killed, Christians being persecuted. Not Americans, not American Christians. They're not touching tourism, but it's not a place where we want to be. So that's another fact for you all to know. Although affected by several ideologies, I'm in the last paragraph for this chapter, such as communism for much of the 20th century, Islamic identity and the prominence of Islam in political issues have increased almost indisputably during the last years of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st. Rapid growth, Western interest in the Islamic regions, international conflicts, and globalizations have influenced the importance of Islam in shaping the world in the 21st century. Okay. It is even practiced a lot here now in the United States, Islam, the Islamic religion. Very, very popular. So the Empire of Carolingian. Charles Magny originated. Carolingian Empire was the empire of Charles Magny or Charlie Magny. I can't say that, guys. I apologize. Which produced a true renaissance of the time. The elements of Christianity, the barbarian world, and the Greco-Roman culture intermingled to give rise to our current Western culture. One of the most important German kingdoms was the Frankish kingdom, unified by Claudio. With him, the reign of the Merovingian dynasty became named in honor of his grandfather, Merovich. When Claudio died in 511, the kingdom was divided into four. The Neustria to the west of France, Australia to the east, Burgundy to the south center, and Aquitaine to the southwest. However, the struggles between the Merovingians led little by little to them losing prestige and power, which is why they were called the lazy kings. Faced with the decline of the kings, the nobles became the true power holders. Take note of this, guys, please. The nobles became the true power holders. The nobles. They received the title of palace butlers as at the beginning of the 7th century. The butlers of Australia of the Herstal family gained supremacy. So there are these nobles now that are coming into play. They're taking over what the kings are losing. Nobles are basically rich families, rich men. They're known as the nobles. They have money. They have because of this money, they're able to provide military power. Because of military power, they're able to take over politics. Because of politics, they are to have power. So these nobles really became a whole new way of government for them. Every man for himself, technically. So let me continue here. We're going to read into this right now, what I explained. Charles Mazo belonged to this family. He stopped the advance of the Arabs in the Poitiers battle, France of 732, and his son Pepin, the Short, who dethroned the last of the Merovingian kings in 751. united the kingdom again and was crowned king of the Franks. So Pepin united the kingdom after he got rid of the king. Then the Merovingian dynasty ended and the Carolingian dynasty began. Within this family, Charles Magne was born, the first German king who tried to rebuild the Western Roman Empire. So there, here he comes trying to rebuild Rome. You can write that down. The year of 751, he takes over and is trying to rebuild Rome. It could be on your test, it could not. It's just that dates are very important with history, and that's usually what tests test you on the dates. Okay. So King Charles Magne. In 768, Pepin divided his kingdom between his sons Charles and Charles Magne. However, 3 years later, the later 10, I think they meant to write 10. I could be wrong because it's French. The latter 10 and Charles inherited the entire kingdom. The new Frankish king was known as Charles Magne, who means Charles the Great, and was one of the most prestigious monarchs in medieval medieval Europe. So this is still the dark times, the dark ages. Very, 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 very famously known, where the kingdoms and guards and knights, crusades. So we're entering a new era, the feudal. The feudal regimen originated. Okay, the term feudalism comes from the word reef, which was a name given to the territories that the medieval kings gave to the nobles in exchange for their services. So kings gave away reef to people, which is basically large land, a lot of land for your service. So these nobles have these fiefs. I kept saying reefs with an R, but it's fief. And now that they own all this land, they are Lord, let's say, for example, Isaías Rivas, you are now Lord Rivas of Edinburgh, because you own a fief, right? King gave it to you. You are now a noble Rivas. That was just an example. But you're given this for their services, which is basically providing military power for the money, providing maybe a sense of providing slavery for the kings, concubines, such things like that. You would give a daughter or two and sell it to the king in exchange for these fiefs. So that's what services were back in the day. Okay, it was just a trade of this, a trade of that. Let's continue. When we talk about feudalisms, we refer to political, social, and economic systems that emerged in Western Europe from the 9th century that was fully consolidated between the 10th and 14th century. From the 15th century, a period of transitions opened where many features of the feudal system were still in force at the same time that the condition of the subsequent emergence of the capitalist systems were developing. Okay. In the feudal system, political power was headed by a king, but he was a ruler with very little power. In fact, it was the great nobles who had the power, each one commanding their lands called dominions, manors, or lordship, Lord Rivas. That's why it is said that feudalism is characterized by the existence of a fragmented sovereignty, or what is the same as fragmentation of political power. One of these features that characterizes feudalism is that the nobility, which is the dominant social class, exercises an exclusive monopoly on law and justice. This means that only members of the nobility could impose law and justice. On the other hand, the peasant could not access these privileges. So what's a modern day example? What does that mean? How do these nobles even have a go at getting the power? It's what the best example I can give you is like a county. Hidalgo County, county of Star County. Each has their own, I guess you can say, civilization, their own town, their own official representative, right? And it's just a county next to each other. Now, The only difference is we now in our government, we can re-elect or elect a new representative. But the way that their system was, there was no election. It was just somebody had this large amount of land. People would come in and out. And there goes the Lord, the noble, who lets you live in his land, lets you have your farms, and he can take something from you because you're on his land. And it's basically like a taxes kind of system where, okay, you can live here, but make sure you give me 20% of your grain every year, every time, every harvest. Or let me have your first daughter, or let me have such and such because you're on my land. So that is the best example I can give you, like a county. Big area, big land, but you have your lord on that land. Same thing like manors. They had huge houses being built for them, and in exchange for having their house built, you can live on his land, or you can live in the stables, you can live next door. So that's the best example I can give you. Maybe a movie that you guys can probably watch would be like Robin Hood, which would which would show somewhat how the system would work. Because in that movie, he's like Lord Loxley or whatever, and he becomes Robin Hood because of the because of the betrayal of his government and such. But that's kind of how the system worked. Somebody was always in charge, and usually was a noble, was a lord. Okay. On the other hand, I'm reading the next paragraph. On the other hand, we have to explain that the concessions of fiefdoms or territories that the monarch granted to the nobles or vassals who stood out in the war or in another form of service was common and the way to recognize the value of the knights or nobles who went into battle. This donation was not only due to generosity of the sovereigns, but was a way to ensure the defense and union of the kingdom. Their delivery was signed during the realization of an act of great solemnity that was divided into three stages, which is tribute, oath of allegiance, and investor. So they basically owned large lands, these nobles, and provided bulk military strength. That is how you can identify a lord, a noble, somebody who's just had a large amount of land, money too, to provide military. The next page, page 15, we have a pyramid, right? The very first person on top of the pyramid was the king. He has little power, but he's still above everybody. The next one was the nobles. The next one after that, level 3, is basically noble apprenticeship. People who were living with the nobles, who they were being provided everything from the noble. And they would provide services like being a guard, being a knight at the manor, being a security guard, being a servant of the noble, being his cook, his chef. The one after that was the best example I can give you is commercial jobs. People who were blacksmith, they had their own commercial shop. He would I guess, forged you some materials, some tools, whatever you needed, and you would pay him money because that was his occupation. Another example could be such like a priest from a church, people in the church. After that, the next level is still the working class, but they had other jobs. You can see here in the pictures, I'm noticing that there's pictures here. Jobs such as mining or harvesting. After that would be the lower class who did things such as planting, with cattle, with soil. They're always in the dirt, in the mud. They wouldn't be indoors like a blacksmith could be indoors, away from the sun. They were more like slaves. Like peasants would be the title that they gave them, but more like slaves. The next paragraph, we're on page 15. The monasteries begin. So monasteries, let's read it and then I'll explain to you what's another function that they have. So the monasteries begin. For thousands of years, there have been men who have voluntarily left society to retire, to meditate and pray in solitude. They are the hermits and the anchorites. In some cases, they prefer to group themselves into small communities, which would then try to achieve these same objectives. In this way, the monasteries emerged small, self-sufficient microcosms, which were governed by their own rules, sorry. Soon, the rest of society, eager to watch their sins and to be included into the monks' prayers, was offering the monasteries donations intended to ennoble the monastery's buildings. Letters were developed in the monasteries, predominating the topic of theology and philosophy, literature, and plastic arts. So everybody wants to be a monk. Everybody was eager to get to know God. So they would do this by leaving society. And same thing happens here where it became in the sense of it like a church. You would give everything to the monastery. You would be accepted. All your belongings, we would go to them. They would sell it to provide food for themselves and stuff. And you would live apart from the society. Okay. The next page, page 16. We're gonna finish this whole book today, guys. Only a few more pages. Everything will be finished today. So page 16. The Crusades to recover the holy places of Jerusalem. The Crusades were a series of military campaigns during the mid-European age against the Muslims of the Middle East who had conquered Jerusalem, the Holy Land, Jerusalem. In 1076, Muslims had captured Jerusalem, the holiest of all holy places for Christians. Jesus was born in nearby Bethlehem and had spent most of his life in Jerusalem, where he was crucified. There was no more important places on earth than Jerusalem for a true Christian. Reason why the Christians of Jerusalem called it the city of God. The origin of the word Crusaders had been attributed to the fabric cross and used as a badge on the outwear of those who took part in these enterprises of reconquest of the Holy Land. So maybe you guys have seen movies, or like maybe this has come up on those old movies that y'all seen. This was the Crusader album. There were knights who had it on their helmets, on their armor, on their fabric, basically signifying that they are here in the name of God. They're here to kill in the name of God. Everything you owned, we're possessing it in the name of God. Now, I'm doing quotes because a lot of these crusades were not actually for God, by God and for God. No, they were basically the church itself wanted land, the church itself needed more money. Maybe there was influence by the church for people to for them to send people to start killing others, to repossess their things. And it was always a political agenda behind it. We're going to keep reading into this. However, Jerusalem was also very important for Muslims since Muhammad, the founder of the Muslim faith, because there is a rock mosque, who also called Mosque of Omar, or the Dome of the Rock, which is one of the most sacred places of the Islamist religions, for being considered the place from which Muhammad ascended to heaven. So yes, part of the Quran is the belief that Muhammad ascended to heaven like Jesus ascended to heaven. So the best comparison here is Muhammad is their Jesus, right? And Jesus to us is our Jesus, that he is the Trinity, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and the Father. But Muhammad for them is basically the same thing, where they're trying to honor their Jesus, their beliefs. Therefore, the Christians fought to recover the Holy Land, Jerusalem, while the Muslims fought to maintain it. There were wars were going to last almost 200 years, from the year 1095 to 1291. Almost 200 years. So the Crusades, recovery of the Holy Land, Jerusalem. Obviously, that the title means that we did reclaim Jerusalem, right? So the Crusades were a series of wars fought between the 11th and 13th century between the armies gathered by the Christian kingdoms of Europe and most of the Muslim armies of Asia Minor and the Eastern Mediterranean. Blah, blah, blah. Mediterranean, okay? These Holy Land Reconquest Crusades were blessed and often invoked by the Roman papacy and motivated by the feeling that it was religious eminent to evict Muslim occupation from the land where Jesus Christ was born, preached, and died, These crusades are called wars of religion. So I want you all to underline Roman papacy. Roman papacy. What does that mean? That means the Pope is in charge. If the Pope says go conquer, you would go and conquer. If the Pope says that you are to give a certain amount of money to the church, you would give that money to the church. Roman papacy was that government where the Pope was on top. The Pope. Okay. In other words, in this pyramid, the Pope would be on top. Okay. However, in reality, the Crusades had eminently political and economical motives within the feudal world of the European and Byzantine Middle Ages, and as the practical purpose, the defense of Christians in the Holy Land against Muslims. They are also considered by many historians as the answer of the Christianity to the Islamic Jihad of the 7th century. Brother Rivas, pleasure to have you here. Let's see, we have a chat. Are you able to hear me, brother?
Yes, I am.
Yes, okay, awesome, great. It's recording, so everything that I've already talked about will be online. But I'm currently in page 16. I'm at the very last paragraph of page 16.
Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna continue. The Crusades originally aimed to recover Jerusalem, the Holy Land, from the hands of the Muslims, and were launched in response to a call for help by the Byzantine Christian Empire against the expansion of the Turkish Seljuk Muslims in Anatolia, which is Asia Minor. So these Crusades weakened feudal government, weakened that the nobles had the power, as how we talked before in the feudalism. That government was already disembarking thanks to the Crusades. Since it was pretty much every man for himself, you couldn't handle a whole church coming at you trying to take possession of what you owned. You were alone against the whole church. It increased the power of the church and wealth of the Pope. That is why in Venice, over there in Rome, they have the biggest church. Roman religion revolves around a lot of wealth in general, like businesses. The Roman Empire has funded a lot of businesses, and it's received a lot of help from these same businesses that it funds. Sorry, I'm getting a text message. Okay, I'm replying Sister Norma. Okay, page 17. The term crusades is also used to describe contemporary and subsequent campaigns carried out until the 16th century in territories located outside the East, usually against pagans, and heretics. The Crusades had far-reaching political, economic, and social repercussions, some of which have lasted until contemporary times due to internal conflicts between the Christian kingdoms and their political powers. Some of the Crusades' expeditions were diverted from their original purpose, such as the Fourth Crusade, which resulted in the looting of Christian Constantinople and the partition of the Byzantine Empire between Venice and the Crusaders. So they took the money for themselves. The Sixth Crusade was the first crusade that set sail without the Pope's official blessing. The Seventh, Eighth, and Ninth Crusade resulted in defeats of the Christian kingdoms against the Mamluks and the Berbers. The Ninth Crusade marked the end of the Crusades in the East. We realized that we're doing too much for our own sake, and the Crusades era was already coming to an end. There was no more persecution towards anybody, conversions towards anybody anymore. Events of modern history. The next paragraph says, the period of modern history begins with the fall of Constantinople and the discovery of America. In this period, the sciences were developed. So this is already the end of the Dark Ages. This is the end of we called it from page 13. I don't know, page 11, sorry. The high middle age or the lower middle age, that is it for them. Those two periods are over. We are now entering modern history, where we live today. So the printing press was invented and a copy of the Bible was made in the German language. There were many geographical discoveries. The rebirth movement began. The reform movement began. The conflict called 30 Years' War began. The modern age, the third era of world history is called modern age. It marks the study of the events that took place since 1453, year in which the taking of Constantinople by the Turks took place, the last stronghold of the Byzantine Empire until 1789, when the French Revolution broke out. So from here, Brother Rivas, you can highlight the year 1453. It was the year in the taking of Constantinople by the Turks by the Turks took place. Okay, there you go. The test could also ask you about the French Revolution and the year 1789, like what year it was, so you might want to mark that down as well. Next paragraph. Main characteristics of the modern age. The modern age, despite its short duration, was the most surprising and brilliant. With regard to material and intellectual advancements, the characteristics of modern age are the anthropocentric sense of life. Anthropocentric sense of life means it's the belief that humans are the most important entity of Earth. Basically, let's not waste our time in studying religion anymore. Let's study the human body, in other words, right? So nature and man were, in the modern age, the central objectives of scientific and literary studies, as well as artistic admiration in all its branches. While in the Middle Ages, life was considered as a transit in which the true path to eternal happiness, heaven, was sought. In the modern age, especially with the Renaissance, man, without abandoning his religion, seeks his earthly happiness. There is an anthropocentric conception of life that we should be benefiting ourselves, in other words. The man of the modern age wants to live fully, chasing fortune, seeking fame and triumph in the earthly world. Sounds like today, doesn't it? Sounds like where we're living at today. Everybody wants to be famous. We feed on that same desire with social media, such as like wanting to be TikTok famous, wanting to be Instagram famous. It's a concept that we're still living in today. That's the modern age, that we are very anthrocentric. Anthropocentric, sorry. So the next point, B, page 18. B, the individualistic character of modern man. The anthropocentric conception made modern man somewhat selfish, assigning him an individualistic behavior. The triumph stopping being collective and union, but rather it became an individual achievement. For this, it was necessary the development of the personality through literacy and artistic training with skills and abilities that distinguished them from others. Being wealth and fame, the objective of modern man, competition became inevitable, which allowed them to reach this goal. Men of great talent, as in the case of Renaissance, who studied later. In this point, we can just take note, competition was inevitable. Basically, we want to be better than others. And we definitely practice that today for sure. We even throw a whole competition every 4 years known as the Olympics to see which state, which country has the fastest person for this, the best athlete for that. So moving on to point C, the rising of the absolute monarchies. The decline of the feudalism. economic instability, and social problems of the time, where the common interest that gave unity to all social classes to support the monarchy as a possible remedy for all its ills. It was the rich, cultured bourgeois with political ambition, who supported with other resources the rising of the monarchs. Point D, artistic, literary, and scientific progress. With the impulse of the Renaissance, the great geographical discoveries and economic growth of the monarchies, the arts, the letter, the sciences developed remarkably. But it was the 17th and 18th centuries that experienced amazing intellectual progress, especially in the science and philosophy. As an example of this intellectual progress, we have the French Revolution. The French philosophers and encyclopedists who, with their advanced ideas of freedom, equality, and fraternity, prepared the avert of the contemporary age prior to the French Revolution. Oh, it was leading to the French Revolution. Sorry, I think I said that backwards. So the most important events of modern age. The modern age offers us a set of important and fascinating events. One, the great scientific and technological advances at the beginning of the modern age. We are talking scientific and technological advances. I don't know what equipment exactly we're talking about, but we could be probably referring to the train, the steam engine, or making metalworks like the Industrial Revolution later on. So I'm not sure exactly which technological advances, but where we're at today, we can only interpret that as that. So number two, the great geographical discoveries, which allow the knowledge of most of the Earth's surface, such as things like when we were traveling, hiking, the Lewis and Clark expedition, made it more possible that we walk on land easier because we had backpacks and we can carry food. We had tents, so we can build it easier. We had a more convenient way of exploring. The Renaissance, number three, that is the flourishing of the arts and letters in Western Europe, as well as the importance of the Reformation and the religious Counter-Reformation. Number four, the formation of the great European monarchies and the new states of the 18th century. Number five, the cultural development of the modern age. Cultural development. So we're going to go into the contemporary history. It's events that happened that transformed the world. So the first one being the French Revolution, 1789 to 1799, 10-year war. The next one, the Napoleonic Empire and its decline. That one's from 1800 to 1815. Liberal Revolution from 1820 to 1845. And social movements and revolutions of 1848. The next one, development of European nations and other religions. I'm sorry, other regions. I apologize. The contemporary age is a current specific period of its history of the Western world. Fourth period of world history, according to the European Division of History, that began from the French Revolution and that follows it process to the present. The beginning of the contemporary age was quite marked by the philosophical current of the Illustration, which would raise the importance of reason. There was a feeling that the science would always discover new solutions to human problems and that human civilization would progress every year with the new knowledge acquired. The contemporary age began in the 18th century. During the outbreak of the French Revolution, in this period, philosophy gave evaluation to science and extended its scientific method to other disciplines, presenting the following positive characteristics, such as complete contempt for everything that was far from the sensitive and concrete experience, the over-evaluation of the science of the supreme model of knowledge, and exclusive concern to study only what can be useful for man. Men confirmed their ideas by comparing them with concrete reality, with sensory experiences. Man abandoned the consideration of the cause and whys of the phenomena and goes on to analyze the process, the law under which these phenomena occur. Basically, God teaches us why, religion teaches us why, science teaches us how. And the focus was we need to figure out the how. We need to figure out how these things happen instead of why these things happen. That was the whole shift change. Facts of the contemporary age. The history of the contemporary age includes the period of time that runs from the French Revolution to present day. The contemporary era or contemporary age is marked in general by the development of consolidation of the Western capitalist system during the Industrial Revolution, and consequently by the dispute of the great European powers over territories, raw material, and consumer markets. We're in the last page, page 20. During the contemporary age and the First World War and the Second World War occurred, this event of the world wars led to a government of skepticism to the world, with the perception that nations considered as advanced and educated were capable of committing atrocities worth of barbarians. Hence the concept that the classification of developed and undeveloped countries has a limited application. Basically, the more advanced we are, the more danger we are to each other. And of course, it's talking about like nuclear war, such as the Cold War that occurred after the World War II, with Russia, where who can create the most nuclear bombs. We are still in that war, technically speaking, only because of all the threats that has been going on between nations and nations, the allies that we have with one another. That is where it's stating here, we're capable of committing atrocities worth of barbarians, making havoc, raising havoc. That is the whole class, guys, already. I started today from page 11, Isaias, but you can find that once it's posted. Thank you. So there's no test next week because of Thanksgiving. Class is being canceled. So in order to have a grade for everybody for their test, I'm gonna give a homework assignment. I'm gonna give more information to Isaias to send it to you on the group chat. But for now, the homework will be we did that last week, so I don't think we're gonna have that bad of a homework. Let me see here. We're gonna go with something in the beginning of our class. Nobody came today, so I can't really give homework from today. There's no test. I made y'all mark so many things that there's no test at the end. Okay, in that case, we're gonna focus on prophecies, okay? Biblical prophecies. That way we can relate it back to our world history class. I had given an example a few weeks ago, I believe it was the second week, so it might have been last class, where we talked about the Euphrates River and how it was prophesied already in Revelations, where the Euphrates was going to be drying up, which marks the coming of our Lord. So I want you all for your assignment to provide me as many prophecies that you can find in the Bible that are currently today in action, that are currently today occurring, that are already occurring, that are coming true. Okay. You guys can email it to me, and I'll send my email to Isaiah so he can send it to you all. in the group chat. That way you all have a place to send it to. You can turn in this homework whenever. If you want to turn it in by Saturday and get it over with Saturday, that is fine. I am asking minimum half a page of whatever you guys, your research can find. Put in the Bible verse and a link if you want to put a link article connected to it or your own summary connected to it. That is fine with me. I just need something to grade for your test, and I think that would be very interesting for y'all to knowledge yourselves in the prophecy already in the Bible and Revelations and how it's occurring today in our modern age. So that's gonna be the homework. And Isaias, I'll be sending it